Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Today, I'm going to be talking about a company that is near and dear to my heart, Fluor Corporation. Quick disclosure, I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I'm a big, big fan of Fluor. I own a lot of shares. Uh, there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on here that no one's talking about. I feel blessed that I have discovered this gem. And of course, this research partially is due to a really close friend of mine who has kind of looked into the political aspects of things that are going on, which you'll hear later on in the video. But I'm trying to really paint a very holistic view of what's going on here. So, if you want to watch the exciting, innovative stuff, that's towards the end of the video. You could skip to it, but I highly, highly suggest that you also listen to the really kind of bad things about Fluor and some of the other business segments that are really, really going to be very, very uh, strong drivers of revenue and good growth in the future. So without further ado, I'll begin. So Fluor is a Fortune 500 construction company. They were founded in the 1900s, early 1900s, and they have had a very long history, starting in oil and gas and then spreading out into different industries like chemicals, pipeline construction, um, biopharmaceutical manufacturing, mining, infrastructure, basically any type of construction that you could think of, specifically large construction. Fluor designs, engineers it, they'll procure the materials, and then they'll get the construction crews and manage the projects for the client. So one of their largest clients has been BHP, which is a major, major mining company. They have had uh, large contracts with the government. They've actually done a lot of work in Afghanistan and in Iraq. They're a major, major government contractor. Uh, they have done work with ExxonMobil, which unfortunately, obviously, I think most people realize that oil probably isn't the future, but it really just gives a good understanding of what this company is capable of. So it's just absolutely gotten hammered since 2014, which is also worth noting. The company's only worth like $2 billion, $2.3 billion. That's their market cap now. This is, in my opinion, a very good deal for this kind of company. It's a $16 stock. In the 2014, it used to be $80 a share. So down 80%. It's trading at quite a discount. With mean reversion, it could probably go back to 40, $60 range. I think probably with the coronavirus ending and then them fixing some of the really bad stuff, they could probably make it back to this. So, this is just to really illustrate the losses that they've had. $1.5 billion loss in 2019, and then there's another $400 million loss in 2020. This isn't cash though, which I realize sounds very bizarre. Of course, $1.5 billion just disappearing, that's a monetary value that has left the business. But when you actually look at their cash flow, cash flowing in and out of the business, specifically their operating cash flow, but this is similar for free cash flow as well if you want to use a more stringent measure. They generated $200 million from the actual business itself. If you look at the market cap, which is $2 billion, that's almost 10%. That's pretty interesting, and I think gives you an idea of what the business is actually capable of, the underlying business is actually capable of. Now, of course, there are other metrics you could use to analyze it, and this $200 million is a bit generous because it does not include capital expenditures. But still, I think it's a pretty decent result. 2020 has seen that go down a little bit because many of their partners have delayed construction spending. I believe it was about $100 million in 2020. So that's worth noting. But I believe fundamentally 2019 is especially interesting to look at because that is really the apex of when they had this major loss. So what caused the loss? This is interesting to talk about too. The loss is mostly related to Fluor writing off their the value of their assets. So they had a number of balance sheet items known as goodwill, which they impaired and basically said that this is, it's written on the balance sheet for $1, and we're going to take 50 cents off and write down the true value of this asset. So much of the loss comes from that. Fluor also had these really terrible contracts that they negotiated called lump sum contracts. These contracts essentially had a maximum price guaranteed to the customer, and Fluor felt that if they invest a lot in their cost estimation processes and bidding processes, they'd be able to offer these clients a sort of, here's the maximum price. This is what we agree on, and we're going to come in lower than that, which of course takes a lot of the risk off the customer themselves because they know, okay, well, we're going to build this and it's only going to cost this much. Let's write it all down. Let's agree on it instead of having a project where it's fixed price or excuse me, reimbursed as the project goes and the prices kind of fluctuate a little bit more. Fixed price really has a big advantage. But unfortunately, it didn't work out, and they were too aggressive with their fixed price contracts. It does make sense in some segments if you get a good spread and you really get a nice little buffer so that if there is a cost overrun, they'll still be okay. But the way that they applied it across their energy business and chemicals business, and particularly their infrastructure business, which has really seen the full brunt of this, it was sort of irresponsible and really led to these um, major losses. What's also interesting and worth mentioning in 2019 and then also into 2020, Fluor actually had to fund multiple loss contracts. So they were actually burning cash, finishing these terrible projects that had major cost overruns. Since then, now we're in 2021, there's about $1.2 billion in zero margin contracts that Fluor still has to complete, but they're not burning cash anymore. They're kind of just tying up resources and creating a problem for Fluor. But they're finishing them at a rate of roughly $700 million a year. By 2022, 2023, I think they're going to be able to finish this. And this just, further goes towards my point. I believe at least they have $2 billion in the bank. One of the bad things was they actually sold stock recently and raised an additional $500 million, which isn't reflected in this. That's for 2021. But even without that $500 million cash range, they still have quite a bit in the bank. The reason they raised that capital, which is also worth mentioning, is they felt the $500 million would be important to reduce their debt, pay off some of the liabilities, and retain their investment grade credit rating. That's a major step in the right direction because obviously if you're going to sign a contract with Fluor, you'd like to see an investment grade credit rating. So they're trying very hard to get that investment grade credit rating back, and thus the stock sale was uh, important to them. I buy it. I'm a little bit skeptical of Fluor's management. Sometimes they are a little bit cagey with investors, but they fired the old management team that got them into this mess. They brought back the old CEO, Alan Beckman, who did a pretty good job and was responsible for the earlier 2000s to 2010 performance of Fluor. He's back now. He's chairman of the board. Many of the board directors have resigned. They have a new CEO, David Constable, who I think is very capable from listening to him speak. They have a new CFO. They've really overhauled the management team, and I think that there's real recognition that Fluor, at least their management realizes that they screwed up. They made some big mistakes. And hopefully going forward now, their approach will be better. One of the main things that this management team has also done is they've said, setting aside infrastructure, because infrastructure contracts are only fixed price, they will no longer bid on fixed price contracts almost exclusively. Infrastructure is different because the government typically only does fixed price contracts. But in that scenario, they've become significantly more restrictive and have exited a number of state municipalities who have had very poor lump sum contract terms that have been really, really bad for Fluor. So in infrastructure, they're becoming more selective, and then across the board, they're no longer going to bid on fixed price contracts. So now we could get into the exciting stuff. Fluor's oil and gas business, which had a lot of fixed price contracts in it, obviously is 40% of the revenue. And that is not good because oil and gas will likely decline and is not a uh, really great driver of earnings going forward. So what are they going to do? Well, Fluor has a mining business, which I think is very interesting. If you believe that we're going to get serious about climate change and really try to reduce our carbon emissions, this is probably a segment that you want to take a look at and pay a lot of attention to. Fluor is a market leader in mine construction. A lot of mines are built in really, really remote regions. There's not a lot of infrastructure around them. You need to build things like rail that lead to the mine so that they could get the rare earth materials out. And, you know, look at this table, right? Some of the things that they're going to be targeting: lithium, nickel, copper, iron, aluminum. That's very, very interesting for electric cars and energy transition, windmills, solar. This stuff all is going to be pretty important in order to build these um, projects. The Senate has also passed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill. It's bipartisan, so I think it's likely that this bill will make its way down through the House and then eventually be signed by the president. This is very positive because Fluor's infrastructure segment, which has historically not been very good, there will be a boom in spending for this area, and that should lead prices to rise. Fluor builds bridges, Fluor builds highways, they build airports, subways, rail, all things that are being looked at in these infrastructure bills. There's another one that's also potentially being considered. That should be a major, major positive for Fluor's business. Here's some of the projects in infrastructure that Fluor works on, if you want to pause the video and just look it over. So, mining is part of Fluor's Urban Solutions business segment, but what else is in there? There's data centers, semiconductor foundries, smart batteries. They could build all this. Biopharmaceutical. So there's this factory that was built by Fluor for Novo Nordisk in North Carolina recently. Major, major complicated project that required a lot of expertise. Fluor came in, they designed it, they built it on time, on schedule, and the factory now makes active ingredients for insulin to treat diabetic patients. I think that this is a really good illustration of what Fluor is truly capable of. Oh, there's one more thing I want to mention about this. So while oil is going to decline, there could be some bull case for natural gas. I'm a bit skeptical of it, but Fluor is currently building a project in Canada called LNG Canada, a huge, huge natural gas liquefaction station that will be focused on exporting natural gas to Asia. And this is a really interesting portion. I just want to use it to illustrate that I don't think all of oil and gas, really their energy business, is a total loss. Just specific portions of it are going to be challenging in the future. So now we get into NuScale Power, which is kind of the more speculative side of the business, but is really, really exciting. So Fluor is a minority investor in NuScale Power. They have the exclusive rights to um, uh, build factories, or not factories, but power plants for NuScale Power. What is NuScale Power? That's probably important to say. NuScale Power is a small modular reactor company. They are taking essentially the reactors that are found aboard nuclear submarines, taking most of them, 12, up to 12, putting them in a nuclear power plant and generating electricity with them. This electricity will be carbon free, and it will be a major, major uh, tool that we could potentially use for the energy transition. What's really interesting about NuScale Power is they're actually approved by the NRC. Their design made it through a very, very rigorous process uh, that was reviewed and required a lot of money to be able to push it through. Fluor was, at the time, one of their major investors. They've since sold some of the equity, but Fluor really helped the NuScale get through this, and many of the people who run NuScale are Fluor executives, former Fluor executives, and former Fluor employees. So Fluor has a lot of pull at NuScale, and like I mentioned, they are the exclusive construction company for NuScale, and they have all the rights to building these power plants for NuScale. So if this takes off, this could really be a game changer. Now, how on earth did NuScale manage to get approval for their nuclear reactors? Well, it just so happens that NuScale has had multiple meetings with President Donald Trump at the time, and they were kind of involved in the uh, Saudi Arabia, selling of nuclear intellectual property that ultimately landed Michael Flynn in a lot of trouble. I don't know exactly what the specifics were of this, but it's worth noting that Fluor, and more so, I guess, NuScale in this scenario has some interesting pull and are in some interesting conversations. Now, another potential reason for this is Carlos Hernandez, one of Fluor's transition CEOs, or the interim CEO, I should say. He actually donated $250,000 to Trump's inauguration committee. So, they do, if you look at their lobbying data really closely and their super PAC data, they play both sides of it. They've given money to Democrats, they've given money to Republicans, but I think that this is a really interesting manifestation and, dare I say, connection between donation and actual results. Of course, there's a conversation about ethics to consider here, and you know, that's a separate conversation. But just strictly looking at it from this point of view, it's an interesting note that's worth talking about. So the carbon-free power project, potentially another interesting manifestation of this. The Department of Energy gave UAMPS, Fluor's first customer, or NuScale's first customer, $1.4 billion to build an SMR plant. That's kind of interesting. I don't know. It's and also worth mentioning is in the infrastructure deal, there's a lot of uh, language in there about supporting SMRs and commercially deploying SMRs throughout the United States. So there's something going on here, and hopefully someone smarter than me can look into this, but as you go through it, you begin to notice a lot of bizarre things around Fluor, around NuScale, and all their really strong connections. President Biden, his platform heavily focuses on SMRs as well when he was running. So there's some really cool stuff about to happen, and I think that NuScale alone can definitely really just make Fluor's share price explode. I mean, it's crazy. Ask yourself this. Is NuScale Power worth $2 billion? The DOE just gave their first customer $1.4 billion. The plant itself is going to probably cost, I think, around $6 billion, $5 to $6 billion. It's really compelling argument here. So, with that, I'll let you ponder this. Let me know what you guys think. If if I'm off topic or I misrepresented anything, please let me know. I'll be quick to fix it. I want to make sure that this is all accurate and truthful and a really good explanation of what's going on here, an explanation of the investment thesis. But as always, again, this is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. This is just really exciting, and I want more people to know about it.